Is the Mamiya 1000 DTL a better camera than this classic Pentax Spotmatic? Keep watching this edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus to find out my opinion. Recently, I picked up this Mamiya 1000 DTL on eBay for a very good price, and I made a video describing the features and controls on this camera. I'll put a link in the description below to that video. I was pleasantly surprised with the Mamiya, so I decided to compare it to the Pentax Spotmatic, which was the second 35mm SLR I ever owned. Before I get to the comparison, if you like videos on vintage cameras and lenses, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. First, let's look at the things that are the same. They both use the M42 screw mount. Both take the same lenses, and there's a lot of M42 screw mount lenses. Both have shutter speeds from 1 to 1,000th of a second, including bulb, and they both sync it with flash at a 60th of a second. On the Mamiya, it's in red. On the Pentax, it just has an orange X next to the sync speed. They both use stop-down metering. Film advance is a single 160-degree stroke for both. Also with both, you could use several smaller strokes. Both take the same optional cold shoe. This happens to be the one for the Pentax, but it will fit on both cameras. And one other thing, on both you will notice on the lens, the direction the aperture turns to go from wide open to the smallest aperture, in both cases here it's 16, you turn it in the same direction. Okay? And both have half click stops. Okay, so now we went over the things that are the same. Now let's look at the differences. The Pentax has full area averaging meter. Okay, measures the entire screen. The Mamiya was kind of unique in its day, and this camera came out in '68, the Pentax in '64, but it has both spot and averaging metering, which is a really nice feature. And it is selected by a switch to go from averaging to spot by a switch on the left of the lens mount. So right now it's on averaging, just push it up, and you have spot metering. Now the operation of the meter on each camera is different. So let me just show you how that works. On the Mamiya, to turn on the meter, let's just put the Mamiya front and center here. To turn on the meter, you just pull out, here, let's do that. You pull out the advance lever. Okay, that turns on the meter. And to meter, as I said earlier, both these cameras use stop-down metering. On the Mamiya, you press in and hold the advance lever. That stops the lens down, and then by turning either the shutter speed dial or the aperture ring, you center the needle in the viewfinder. After you have done that, you release the advance lever, and the aperture opens up to full aperture. You press the shutter release and take your picture. And then to turn off the meter, you just press on top of the advance lever here, right in the center, and you see the advance lever goes back to its home position. The Pentax works a little different. On the Pentax, to turn on the meter, you have this switch to the left of the lens mount, SW switch. You just push it up, and what happens when you push it up? The meter turns on, and the lens stops down to whatever aperture you have set. To center the needle in the viewfinder, you turn the aperture ring, or the shutter speed dial to center that needle. However, while you were doing this with the meter on the Pentax, the aperture is stopped down to whatever aperture you have selected, and then when you take the picture, the aperture opens up to full aperture again. The disadvantage of the Pentax is that meter is on with the aperture stopped down as you take the picture, unless you reach over here and push that switch down. On the Mamiya, it's much easier because all you have to do is release your finger from the advance lever and the aperture opens up and you take your picture. So I think it's a little more convenient to use. I think it's a better system on the Mamiya when metering. And of course you have either the spot or averaging meter, where with the Pentax you just have the averaging meter. Now also the DTL takes a silver oxide battery, more modern battery than the mercury battery that the Pentax takes. The Pentax battery is no longer available. There are substitutes, whereas the meter battery for the Mamiya is still available. On both these cameras, the meter does not work. I really don't care too much about that at this point. I use these cameras occasionally, although I've never used the Mamiya, never ran a roll of film through it, but I don't really care about the meter. I mainly just have these cameras in my collection. I just love these old single lens reflex cameras from the 60s and 70s. Okay, both have a self timer. Okay, and let's cock the shutter on both these cameras. Okay. On the Pentax, you just push the self-timer lever to the right. On the Mamiya, you push it to the left, not a big difference. And you will notice on both cameras, there's a little button there to activate the self-timer. You just press that button. Same thing on the Mamiya. Okay, the self-timer on the Pentax will go anywhere from 5 to 13 seconds. Depending on how far over you push that lever. On Mamiya, it's 6 to 10 seconds, so not a big difference there. What's nice on both of them is because to activate the self-timer, you have to push that little button there. You could cancel the self-timer. If you decide you're not going to use it, just take the picture normally with the shutter release. Before cocking the shutter again, before advancing the film and cocking the shutter, you could just press that button. It'll go back to its home position without wasting a frame. Okay, now focus direction. Although the aperture direction, the direction you turn the aperture is the same to go from the smallest to the largest opening, the focus direction is different, which I was kind of surprised at. With the Spotmatic, you turn the focus ring to the left to focus closer, and to the right to focus on a more distant subject, just like with Nikon. With the Mamiya, you turn to the left to focus at a greater distance. You turn the focus ring to the right to focus at a closer distance. Now that is the same as many cameras, Leica, Minolta, Canon, and many others. But it's a little confusing going back and forth between these two cameras if you happen to be using them both at the same time, that the focus rings turn differently in a different direction. Okay, as far as opening the back, it's a little bit different on each of these cameras. On the Mamiya, you just push up right here, just use a fingernail, back pops open. On the Pentax, you just pull up on the rewind knob and the back springs open. I think the one on the Pentax is a little more convenient just to pull up on that rewind knob. but not a big deal. So now, as you could see, the Mamiya appears bigger. That's because it is, but it appears much bigger than the Pentax than it actually is. The Pentax is 5.6 inches wide. The Mamiya is 5.8 inches wide. So it's not a big difference. In millimeters, the Pentax is 143 wide, 143 millimeters. The Mamiya is 148. Height, you could see that the Mamiya is taller than the Pentax. The Mamiya is 3.7 inches or 95 millimeters. The Pentax is 3.6 inches or 92 millimeters. The Pentax both looks and feels smaller, of course, which it is, but it looks and feels like it's a bigger difference than it actually is. As far as the weight of these cameras without a lens, the Spotmatic is 1 pound 6 ounces or 621 grams. The Mamiya is 1 pound 9.5 ounces or 725 grams. So it is heavier. You could feel that when you pick it up. But the Pentax, just as I said, it feels smaller. It's just nicer to hold, I believe. All right, as far as the ISO setting, and in those days we used ASA, but they mean the same thing. The Pentax has settings from 20 to 1600, the Mamiya from 25 to 3200. So if you like to push film up to 3200, makes it a little easier to do with the Mamiya. As far as the shutter releases, let's make sure these shutters are cocked now. Okay, as you could see, the shutter release, or I hope you can see, let me just straighten these out a little bit. The shutter release on the Mamiya is a little bit bigger around, right? On the Pentax, it's a little smaller. Both take a standard cable release. However, I just feel the Pentax is a little smoother, less pressure required to fire. And not that the Mamiya requires a lot of pressure. It just feels a little harder to push than on the Pentax. It's not something you would notice really unless using both cameras side by side. The Pentax has a cocked shutter indicator. So when we cock the shutter, hope you can see this little window here turns orange. When we release the shutter, it is clear. So we're going to do that again. You can see that, how it turns orange? The Mamiya has no such indication. Another difference is the Pentax has a film type reminder dial around the rewind knob. Right now it's set for empty. You could also turn it to set it for color or black and white film. The Mamiya does not have that reminder. One other thing you will notice, there is a film playing indicator on the Mamiya. No such indication on the Pentax. Now, when new, in 1971, I'm comparing this to 1971 prices. Again, the Pentax was introduced in 64, the Mamiya in 68. In 1971, with a 50 millimeter 1.4 lens, the Pentax sold for $300. The Mamiya with a 55 millimeter 1.4 lens sold for $275. Now that's list price. You may have been able to get it cheaper depending on where you purchased your camera. So the Mamiya is a little bit cheaper, but not much, only $25. Okay, so with all cameras, obviously there's pros and cons of each. The big advantage of the Mamiya, actually I feel there's two, is the fact that you can choose between spot or average metering, which is a really nice choice to have. In Mamiya's ads for the 1000 DTL and also its sister camera, the Mamiya 500 DTL, they really push that, the fact that the Mamiya had both spot and average metering. Also, I think another advantage is the way the meter operates on the Mamiya. I like the fact that you just have to push in this advanced lever to meter, let go of it, and the aperture springs back to full aperture. Whereas on the Pentax, you have to use that switch and then have to reach around to the left of the camera, push that switch down, or just take the picture with the darkened viewfinder. So I think that's a big advantage to the Mamiya. The smoother shutter release and just the better feel in the hands are the two biggest advantages of the Pentax, in my opinion. Also, I feel, and it's not a huge difference, I just feel the Pentax is a little bit better made. It just feels higher quality to me. And I also think it's one of the nicest looking SLRs ever made. Of course, that's not going to make your pictures any better. Now, which would I choose if we're back in 1971 and I wanted to buy one of these cameras? Which one would I choose? I think I would have to go with the Mamiya. Again, I really like the fact that you have spot metering with an averaging meter. If you're shooting in a backlit situation, you're going to have to move in closer or compensate for that reading so you don't get underexposure of your subject. Whereas with the Mamiya, you just set it to spot metering and take a spot reading of your subject. Now, the fact that the meters on both these cameras don't work, if I was going to go out shooting some film, I would take the Pentax. It's a tiny bit lighter. It just feels better in the hand. And like I said, I really like the shutter release on the Spotmatic better. Now, I will put a link in the description below to videos I have done on both of these cameras explaining all the controls, features, and how everything works. So let me know what you think if you've used both of these cameras, which one you prefer. I'd like to hear from you. And also let me know about the reliability. I know the Pentax is a very reliable camera. I don't have as much information on the Mamiya. I know their medium format cameras were excellent, and I never owned one of their 35s until I bought this 1000 DTL. So leave your comments in the comments below. I always try to respond to all comments and all questions. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And also, I'm always looking for suggestions for future videos. If you have any, please leave your ideas in the comments below. And I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So I will talk to you then.